Welcome to another episode of the Cartoon Capricorn Show. We have Safwaan with us. I think this is like his third or fourth. This year, I want to test out a new format. I might actually change the name of the podcast to Carnage and Friends. So kind of just treat this podcast like two friends catching up. So welcome to the show. We are probably going to talk about a lot of random topics, but it's great to see you, man.
Yeah, great to see you. What's been going on since we last spoke?
The thing I'm probably the most excited about right now is I've been playing a lot of Magic the Gathering. So cool. I just did my 2024 review, and like my theme of the year was fun. So I was always like looking for like the question I would always ask myself, is this going to be fun? If the answer is no, I'm not going to do it. So you just ask yourself that question over and over again, and you start going down different rabbit holes. And one of them was Magic. I never played when I was a kid, but I picked it up during COVID. I started playing again and I got hooked. And then I used to play a lot of poker too, competitively. So I was like, kind of reminds me of poker. I want to see how far I can take it. So I'm going to see if I could make the pro tour, which is like really hard, but I think
Okay.
possible. If
So where are you? Are you getting really good? Like how good are you now that you've been spending 2024 doing this?
I would say the highest ranking I got online, which is not, there's a lot of like IRL players too, was like top 1500. I play a very specific format that is part of the pro tour this year called standard. So we'll see. It's a constant, like, I think the thing I liked about poker that I would explain to people when you're like at that highest level is like, if you're playing rock, paper, scissors, you're like 8, 10 levels deep. So if I think you're going to throw rock, I'm going to throw paper, but I know that you think I'm going to throw paper, so you're going to scissors. And it goes like 8 levels deep, and like Magic is kind of similar to that realm. So
I
we'll
see, I
see.
see.
Yeah. So it's been pretty fun. But for all the people that are not in Magic, let's not talk about it too much. But what
Yeah.
have you been up to?
So over the past month, 2 months, I've been starting a company. So not ready to talk about it too much just yet, but pretty excited about AI agents more broadly. I think we started with just like a general chatbot, ChatGPT, a few years ago, and now we're able to give these chatbots or these AIs access to different tools, and now they can take actions. They're not that reliable right now, but if you're at the edges right now, you can kind of see the different places where they can apply. And so I've been exploring different use cases for AI agents, and I'm happy to talk more about the trends and everything else that I've been seeing over the past couple of months.
Yeah, I guess for the listeners, what we did before this podcast is we brainstormed a bunch of topics that we're both interested in, and then we picked a few that overlapped. So yeah, I think we can talk about a few of those. So we have an article that we read about a co-founder that sold his company for close to a billion, AI agents. What else do we have? Open source software and business strategy. So I would say it's probably a little bit of life philosophy mixed with tech and startups. So that's probably what we'll cover
Yeah.
today. And we'll see what other random tangents we'll go down as well.
Yeah. I think I'd love to start with the article by Vinay, the co-founder of Loom. Yeah, I'd love for you to explain a little bit more about the article. I read it briefly and it was a big thing on Twitter. So yeah, I'd love for you to just explain it real quick. And then I have a bunch of questions because I feel like you've also been down a similar path. So yeah.
Yeah. So this, I guess, went viral on Twitter maybe a week or two ago. But Vinay, who's the co-founder of Loom, wrote an essay titled "I'm Rich and I Have No Idea to Do with My Life," which is a great title, by the way. When I read that, I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's going to get so many clicks," and it did. I think it got
Yeah.
like 7,000 likes on Twitter. But to give background on Loom, I guess Atlassian bought it for 975 million dollars in 2023. He was a co-founder. I'm not sure how much he walked away with. I would assume at least 9 figures, 100 million. So he wrote this essay, and I would say the summary of this essay, if you don't read it, it's not that long. And this is not me writing summary. This is like AI. So I'll just read it really quickly. Like, why do the work when AI will do it for you? But he felt lost and sure of his purpose in life. He explored different paths, including trying to start a new robotics company to emulate Elon Musk, which he said was cringe. Then he worked at Doge for a month. Then he quit. along the way, he traveled a lot with his now ex-girlfriend. And today he's in Hawaii studying physics for the sake of learning, accepting that it's okay to not have everything figured out. So that was his cycle. That was his journey.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen this a bunch. It's like founder of hot startup exits and then has existential crisis. Fuck, what do I do with my life now that I have money, but I have like no direction or purpose? And then they go on this journey of, I guess, looking inwards. I feel like that was an era in your life. So I'm curious, like, do you have anything that relates to the things that he's been saying?
Yeah, definitely. I think this reminds me of that tweet I wrote about the repeat founder cycle. So it could be the it could be repeat founder cycle, exit founder, but they all go through the same thing. Whether your company's successful, whether you sold it or not, whether it's shut down, whether they're somewhere in the middle, like all founders go through this cycle where they like hate startups. They try to like buy a physical business or start a podcast, or I don't even remember what I wrote, but and then all the cycle always circles back to starting another company.
Yeah.
So I would put money that in like less than 5 years, he's going to start another tech startup, like
Yeah.
for sure. Especially if he's like in his 30s, like there's like, if you're, what I've learned through this whole experience, if you're hardwired a certain way, it's just really hard to unwire that. And when you feel like you unwire that, you feel like you're losing a part of yourself and you're not being true to yourself. It doesn't mean that like maybe at that moment in time you don't want to do it, or maybe you do need to like take a break. But yeah, so it did relate. And I did pull out a couple things that I thought were interesting or stood out to me from the article. I would say the first one was, this is probably going to be a shocker to a lot of people that weren't in his shoes, but he left $60 million on the table. Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy. But
Yeah.
also, yeah.
So that stood out to me. Like it was just, he just kind of threw it in there like, oh, it was just this thing, you know, it's like a bonus that I just decided not to get. But I think the way he wrote it was, I was walking through the redwoods and I just realized that my freedom is way more important. So I left $60 million on the table. And for those of you that don't know, it's like when your company gets acquired for $1 billion, you don't get all that money. It gets divvied up to the investors, to all the employees. And if you're a founder, they're going to lock you into like a 2, 3, or 4 year agreement, basically, that your stock will vest over that time. And yeah, most founders hate that because they don't like working in big companies. They like being the decision maker, blah, blah, blah. But he left $60 million on the table for his freedom, which makes me feel like he had walked away with right like 600 million or something.
That was exactly my takeaway. I was like, okay, 60 million's on the table. How much
Yeah.
do you actually
Yeah.
Hopefully it was a large amount for him.
Yeah, that kind of stuck out to me. I was like, "Whew, that's a lot of money."
Yeah.
And the other thing that stuck out to me was like, all founders he mentioned like some trauma he had in his childhood, but I think a lot of founders have a little screw that's a little loose that makes them want to go start a company. But those are the two things that stood out. So that's not related to his whole journey, but I wanted to kind of pull out those two things that kind of stuck out to me in that essay.
Yeah, I think this is, so I saw it from a different lens, kind of what a trend that I'm seeing with my friends and my peer group. So I think the old like mantra of Silicon Valley was, or like the old way to win status and success was raise a bunch of money from tier one VCs, you keep growing it, raise more money, et cetera, until you IPO and now you're rich and famous. And then you continue to do that. But one thing I've noticed with my friends is I think because of Twitter, podcasts, blogs, information is a lot more like circulated. And so we get to see the cases of people like Vinay, people like you, other people who quote unquote have like won the game. And even in those situations, we're like, I don't know if I want that for my life.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my friends are opting out of venture funding entirely. It's like, hey, I'm not going to slave away 10, 15 years for somebody else to make money. I'm going to build a company on my own terms. And I think that's become increasingly easier over time, especially with AI and with different tools that are out there. So that's just like a counterpoint to what I'm seeing of like this whole journey that Vinay went on.
I think if you looked at Vinay and thought that was like the ultimate outcome is to sell your company for whatever $1 billion, and this guy's still unhappy, I think the lesson there is no matter what happens, whether it's a success or failure, you still have your own shit that you need to figure out. And he had a lot of questions he ended with, which I thought were good, which we should go over. But like, what game do you actually want to play? And I do find a lot of people that are in their 20s, like you said, especially with how cheap and easy it is to build software now. It's like, why raise any money? But
Yeah.
the caveat to that is like, I feel like if you're building something very difficult, like hard, like very hard tech, you should raise money. But if it's building, I don't know, like a basic software app, it's like, I don't know if you need to raise money at all for any of those ideas.
Yeah. Agreed. I'm curious. This one question that stuck out to me was, why did I need to do the absolute most to reach this point? And the reason it's interesting is because I like working hard, and I feel like I put my energy behind whatever I'm working on. And so my question here is, I guess one, do you think you could have done it any differently, or given that you've seen like this full cycle too? It's like you've been there in your 20s, like grinding it out, and then also seeing the other side. What does that actually look like?
Yeah. I think it's good to actually go through all of his questions and then I'll answer that first one. So the questions he's currently wrestling with, why did I need to do the absolute most to reach this point? Why couldn't I just leave Loom and say, I don't know what I want to do next? Why do I need to feel the need to only be on a journey if it's grand? What is wrong with being insignificant? Why is letting people down so hard? I'm pretty sure one of those questions probably like really resonates with you or anybody that's listening. But for the first one, I just wrote my 2024 review, and the big lesson I had coming out of that was the idea of removing masks. So there's this like a concept that we all wear masks, and before like the age of 40, you do focus on your ego, you do focus on career success, working hard, hitting these milestones that society like deems as like success. And around 40, what happens is you have a choice to either cling on to those personas or start shedding them to figure out like who you really are. That's something I also related to during my own sabbatical, like moving from external expectations towards internal and peeling back all these layers and figuring out who is part of like you've like put on for this costume and which aren't, and like throwing out the mask. So to answer your question, I think it's totally normal to work really hard if that's what you want to do and become successful. I think a lot of these questions just happen like twofold. One, naturally, as you get closer to 40, you have some big life changing moment that accelerates it. Or you read about people going through that. And because the internet is so open now and people are sharing a lot more, you can kind of read that and maybe glean the lesson from yourself at a much younger age. So I think that's kind of permeating throughout culture, especially within the tech industry. And I think that's what's starting to happen. But that's the number one question I get. If you could go back to do it all over again, would you still do the same thing? Like, did you feel like you had to work hard to become successful? And I was like, yes. There's no world where you can, I mean, unless you're like trading meme coins and you get really lucky, like, yes, you gotta work hard. There's like no way around it. There's like, but it's up to you and how hard you want to work and how you want to define success. And those are all like, I wouldn't take society's rules and what society's saying is successful. Like you could figure it out on your own. So I think kudos to everyone that doesn't want to raise VC money, that wants to do it on their own terms. And kudos to the people that do want to raise VC money and like take a swing at something. I don't think there's like a hard rule for it, but I wouldn't do anything differently. I would still want to work hard and prove myself and learn a lot about myself and try to build a company. I don't, today I don't think I would raise money because I don't think Skillshare like today is like that complicated. We could build it in like 30 seconds with AI. But yeah, that is a good question to ask.
Number three was also pretty interesting to me. Why do I feel the need to be on a journey only if it's grand?
Yeah,
I
that's a
thought
good
that was a
question.
pretty sick one. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like to answer that question, it would be like having like a public therapist session. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I could probably answer that based on my own like issues, but yeah, that is a good
Yeah.
question. I think the thing that was pretty interesting, which I found pretty cool, is that he was so open and vulnerable. Like, I don't think I would ever be able to write something like that because it was so
Yeah.
transparent. So I think it's cool that he shared that. And he ended it by saying like, still have a bunch of shit I need to figure out, and I have no idea where this is going to go. I'm in Hawaii studying physics because I want to. See you later. Peace out. Mic drop.
Yeah. It was a gangster way to end, but you're right. There's no way that I would have written out and made that public.
No
Yeah.
way. No way. I mean, it's already hard creating content, and it's already hard to like be like that vulnerable
Yeah.
generally in life, and then to do that on the internet where everyone's. I mean, I didn't read the comments to his tweet, but I'm pretty sure people are like, "Oh, rich guy complaining about not finding purpose in life." Boo hoo. But
Yeah.
I don't know whether he sold it
Yeah.
for $1 billion or whether if it's shut down. I'm pretty sure he would have written it asking the same questions.
I
So
do have one last question, I guess, for you on this related topic. One is, it's this feeling of ambition. For a lot of people, I think listening to this, probably you the same, me too. It's like, I feel like I was put on this earth to do great things, and you have like this ambition and this drive. And if you choose to like let go of that ambition, or do something that is not grand, it's very difficult for me to describe what I'm trying to say. But I feel like it's like I'm worried about letting go of that ambition, and then what will happen to me if I do. At least that's the situation. That's kind of what I feel when I read these essays or I hear about people going through this journey of self-revelation of like letting go of like what external people think and just like focusing on like the internal thing. And I'm curious, do you have a take there?
dude, I've been struggling with that for like ever since I went on my sabbatical. So I worry about that all the time. I think I've let go of like what other people think, and now I'm trying to let go of like what I think about what I think, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, that's
Okay. If I can build something and I find a lot of joy and purpose in building that thing and it benefits society, I should probably build that thing. Right. So it's like whether it's building software or starting a nonprofit or working a nonprofit or running for a political office or volunteering, or like it feels good and to have a sense of purpose to do that. And it probably ties to legacy and how you want to be remembered from, whether you want to be like remembered by everyone in the world or just your immediate family. So yeah, I kind of struggle with that a lot, but I don't really have a good answer for you because I don't think I figured it out yet.
fair enough. Fair enough.
But it is something I struggle with.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I answered your question.
No, that
But how
helps.
do you think about it?
Well, how do I think about it? Everybody listening, take this with a grain of salt. I think the first thing is, I think legacy is a trap. That's one thing that I've realized. It's like, first of all, you're going to be dead. So who cares what other people think? You're dead. You don't remember. Like, you're not watching. You're not caring. So it doesn't matter what other people think about you. I feel like that was a massive unlock for me. The other was looking back at history about like a lot of great people. And if you look back at history, there were like Elon Musk's of previous eras or like conquerors of previous eras that were very famous in their time, but we still don't remember them. We barely remember like a handful of people. If you go ask a random person on the street, like, who was Alexander the Great and what did he do? Most people don't know and they don't care. And so if Alexander the Great is barely remembers, I feel like it's a little weird for me to want to achieve that. I think it's just such a lottery of like how these things happen. You can definitely become a great person and have massive impact during your life, but focusing on your legacy and being remembered afterwards, I think it's a trap that people can fall into. And so letting go of that was a pretty huge unlock for me. The ambition and like fame and wanting to have an impact while I'm alive, that still exists, and I don't have an answer to that. But yeah, that's where I am right now.
Yeah. I used to think the same thing around legacy is like no one's going to remember you. So, like, who cares? Let go of it. But I think today I have like a slightly different viewpoint on it, which is wanting to leave a legacy for me now is like shapes how I live my day to day and how I like treat other people, or like even if they don't remember it, I want to make sure that how I live my day to day and how I interact with people and what I do is how I want to be remembered. And it
Yeah.
doesn't even matter if anyone remembers it. It's just more of like a good way to live your life on a day to day basis when you view it through that lens.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
like kind of retroactive.
Yeah.
retroactively, it's like, how did you influence, like, how did you treat people? How did you actually live your life? Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that is a great way to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how we think about it now, which has been letting go of it and reframing it has been the unlock. All right, let's move off of like life
Yeah.
philosophy. This is getting a little too mushy for me. Let's talk about
Yeah.
tech. Okay.
So find a tweet that you found, Joseph Jacks. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah. So I guess the next topic is startup frameworks, open source and undercut. I think how you titled it. I was like, oh man, I've been thinking about that too. So I saw this tweet that Joseph Jacks wrote, which is this company in India is undercutting Uber with an open source version of a rideshare app. They don't take commission and they charge drivers a flat daily fee, no marketing expenses, and very profitable, while the drivers make way more money. And I think there's like another tweet, maybe followed up with that when Uber tried to go into India, let's say 2 years after Uber entered India in 2013, they were doing 65,000 rides per week and losing $1 million a day. And I guess this company just launched 2 years ago, now has 1 million rides per week, very profitable, instant payouts, 100% of fair pay to drivers with a subscription business model, fully open source platform, now scaling globally. And then he ends with, your margin is open source opportunity. Pretty cool.
Yeah. This is pretty sick. I've been noticing a similar pattern, but I didn't think of it in the lens of marketplaces. I was just thinking about it from simple, like vertical SaaS tools. But when you linked this tweet, I thought this was pretty amazing. It's like, especially for the marketplaces example, the thing that stuck out to me about this was Uber is not going to copy this business model.
No.
Their incentives are totally opposed to this. And so you had the opportunity there to actually undercut them or like compete with them from like a different angle that is not head to head, which is pretty interesting. And then also you get a lot of love from drivers because they get most of the money. Like they make more money. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
they're incentivized to use your platform. So I thought that was pretty genius.
Yeah. I think the bigger thing that you pointed out was like any software take could be copied pretty quickly, right? So like a lot of those like moats that people talk about or like or whatever competitive advantages, etc., are even more important. But it kind of opens up like if you could copy anything and just throw it out there, like where would that work the best? I agree with you that like B2B SaaS software, it's like why not just copy it directly, like feature by feature? And if they're charging $10, charge zero and make money in doing other things. Like if the quality of the product is exactly the same, why wouldn't someone switch? Obviously, if there's like data lock in and you're using this and for your CRM for your company and exporting is a pain in the ass and all this stuff.
Yeah. I think the reason I can talk more about why I think this works specifically
Y-
for open source companies.
Yeah, I'd love to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are a few examples of open source companies competing head to head with existing companies. Speaking of Vinay, Loom has now an open source competitor called Cat. Calendly had Cal.com, Qualtrics, which is like surveys for experiences for enterprise. They have Formbreak, and Firebase now has Superbase. So these are companies that have paved the way, built out the market, educated consumers, and then this
Well,
open source version comes along. And so I feel like, go ahead.
I was gonna say the fire based. They should have called themselves water based because water puts out fire.
Google
But
would have been knocking on their door and being like, yo, take this down.
so how does the open source come in to
Like,
compete? Yeah.
why does it matter that it's open source?
Yeah.
The reason is it doesn't really, besides the fact that it helps with positioning and it helps with marketing. So people have this heuristic that open source is like by the people for the people. That's traditionally what open source has meant. You can go and fork it and create your own version of it. You can amend the code base, add features if you want to. But what a lot of these companies are using it for is a way to get attention. If you ever try to create like a new product, a product that is like a copycat of an existing one, you have a problem, which is how do you break through the noise? And open source is a great way to do that. As soon as you show like, hey, I'm open source, a lot of people will want to support you in that. And so I think that's the main reason that open source works for this. And then two, it helps with like positioning. As soon as you say I'm the open source Firebase alternative, people already know like, hey, okay, they know what the product is, they know who it's for, and they know why they might use you. They don't know the specific feature differentiation or what's different about it yet, but it hooks them enough such that they'll look into it. So I think those are the main two things. It's largely a marketing thing, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, I've never really worked on any open source projects, but I would also assume maybe like if it's like a technical product, it's like, hey, look at our code. Everything is open and public. And then on top of that, if you want to contribute to it, you can as well. Like if you want to build that feature, go build it. And I think in the world with all this AI stuff coming out, like empowering people to like build on top of what you're already building to move faster, I think could be an advantage. I'm not sure that works in reality because how complex it is to coordinate a bunch of people to contribute to a code base. But theoretically, I think that could be an advantage.
Yeah, so this is slightly different, but Vercel does this really well. They have this AI SDK. So it's an open source way to build AI products faster. And they do a bunch of work under the hood to make it easy to get your application off the ground. And for them, they don't really care about monetizing this AI SDK directly. They care about, okay, once you are ready to host your application, do you use Vercel? And so it's like, it's the equivalent of, I guess, like a lead magnet for like an info product or something like that. This is the version for software. The open source version that is a feeder product to their main offering, which they monetize.
Got it. I have a funny story about Vercel too. I guess the founder DM'd me like, I don't know, 5 years ago about what he was building to see if we wanted to test it out at Otis. And I was like, oh, let me hit up our engineer, lead engineer. I'll get back to you. I never hit up our lead engineer. I never got back to him. Oh, like, yeah, what a miss from a, like, I'm not even sure if I could have invested into what he was doing because he wasn't asking about that. He was like, hey, can you
Yeah.
test out our new like thing I'm building? But what a miss of
Yeah.
a
It's all,
opportunity.
yeah, I feel like this is such a San Francisco like startup tech thing that happens. It's like people will hit you up, you'll ignore them, and then a
Yeah.
year, 2 years later, they're like the hottest person in
Oh
town. You're
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
ah,
Yeah. He's
here.
like the biggest company is like what 500,000 followers on Twitter now. But I did respond and I just forgot to follow up. So I respond to most people that message me. I'm pretty nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think we were so busy with Otis that I totally forgot. I think I wrote on a
Oh
piece of
yeah.
paper and it got thrown away or something. But okay, so
So the final thing on here I wanted to ask you about is because you thought about it more from the marketplace perspective.
yeah, because
Yeah,
that's
I'd be
my
curious.
background.
Yeah, what you thought about that side.
Yeah, so for about a day or two, I was like, man, that's so crazy. Let me think about if I had to replicate that strategy into a marketplace, where would I start? So, of course, I asked my chief of staff, ChatGPT, this question, and it came back with a long list of marketplaces. So they said like the gig economy, like Uber, e-commerce, like eBay, education, and they actually put Skillshare. I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, okay. Travel, like Airbnb, crowdfunding, like Patreon, content, like OnlyFans. And I was thinking, okay, it would probably work for a platform that had really high fees. So that it made sense for Uber because they're taking, I don't know, 30%. So undercutting that to zero is like a huge value proposition in the supply side. But then I started thinking, it's like, man, you still have to deal with the demand side. Like, even if you copied Uber, I don't know, in any city in the world, like it's a lot of work to get the demand going and signing up drivers. So I don't think it's as easy as like open sourcing Uber and then all these drivers just show up. I still think there's a lot of work to kickstart that. I think it would work for OnlyFans or Patreon. Like I think it would work for that and for a couple of reasons. But I think 0% fees is a pretty strong value prop for creators. They all have their audiences they've already built out. So you don't have to find the audience for them. It's like, hey, you're making, I don't know, $1 million on Patreon. Like just come over here. We give you zero platform fees, just a basic subscription to use our product or whatever. And we do instant payouts. And I think if you just focus on the supply side, because most marketplaces is or like focus on supply or demand side, 80% of the time is that you focus on the supply side. And if you focus on the supply side where they bring the demand, maybe that can kind of get it going so that you don't have to worry about getting users on the demand side, which is always the hardest part. Well, I think a good segue into AI agents would be like if I could do it, like, let's just say theoretically you wanted to undercut any of these platforms, right? Let's say Patreon. You do all this work, you build it, and then rather than you reaching out to all these people, you actually have AI agents that do it. So I was like, I actually think there could be a way for a one person company to launch where you could build a software really quickly. You can build a bunch of AI agents that do a lot of the grunt work because the hardest part of any startup is getting it off the ground and getting that flywheel spinning. So let's talk about AI agents because I don't know anything about it. But if you had to give like a 101 is like, what is an AI agent? How's it different from a bot? Like, how would you kind of describe it?
Yeah, so I think the best analogy here is there's that saying, if you can automate it, automate it. If you can't, then delegate it. I feel like previous automations, whether you're using Zapier or Make or even just code, they were very much like deterministic. It's like, hey, I want you to do this. If the condition is this, then do something else. It's very much like straightforward and you can automate it. But there are some cases where it's like, it's not crystal clear. Sometimes you need some decision making in there, and you'd usually give that to a VA. It's like, it's not entirely automatable. There's some decision making here, so that's where agents are today. It's like semi-deterministic. A lot of it is like laid out and can be automated, but there are like one or two pieces along this workflow that you're doing that you need some decision making here. One example for like outreach to like creators might be determining who to reach out to and like under what circumstances. And so it could make a decision on like, hey, follow account. Do they have an email in their bio? Are they actually selling a digital product? This is something that AI can easily ingest and then make a decision as to yes or no, I should reach out to them. There are some cases where you can automate this traditionally, but they're very brittle. They break a lot of the time, whereas AI makes this more robust. I think in the future, where we'll go is AI agents where you just give them the high level objective. Like, hey, I want you to do this, go figure it out. In the same way that you work with an employee, it's like, hey, go figure this out. And then they do it. That's the ideal case of both an employee and an agent, I'm aware. But yeah, that's how it's different from bots and where I think we'll evolve to in the future.
But we're not there yet, right?
Not yet, but I can see it being the case like
Yeah.
very soon in the future.
I realized that I wasn't like the best delegator because I would like try to delegate some of this to like AI, and I was like, oh man, I need to give it way more context.
Yeah.
It needs a lot more information in order to do this task.
Yeah.
Um,
I think the best way to work with AI is similar to if you worked with a VA where you just like, hey, like here's a lot of the information that you need to know, go do it. And then it handles it pretty well.
like, what are like some cool things you've seen people build? Like, what's it capable of today?
What is it capable of today? I have seen, so one thing we built, which is not entirely like a full agent. So a lot of people try to build like the full workflow and then they very quickly realize it breaks in a lot of places.
Hmm.
And so what a lot of people are doing are having human in the loop. So the human will verify the information. The AI will do a bunch of the work. Human will verify yes or no, or like make some edits and then continue step by step. And that works incredibly well. One example of this is the AI coding tools like Lovable. Like the AI is doing most of the heavy lifting on the coding side, and then it just asks you for feedback and like, hey, no, actually change it this way, change it that way. The one thing we built was a Google Ads agent. So it would research your company, basically take in all the information, find out what it is, who it was for, then figure out what were the best keywords to run Google Ads for this company, then actually go get that data and then craft the campaign and launch it to Google Ads. So there are like 6 or 7 steps here. And in between each step, we just have like a human in the loop giving it feedback. Because if you do all 6 steps together, it ends up giving you the greatest output. And then if you multiply this by like 1,000 customers, 10,000 customers, now you have thousands of customers that are not getting success.
Got it. Got it. Do you think there's a world where like AI agents do very, very specific things, or they could evolve to like handling more complexity?
Definitely handling more complexity.
Got
I
it.
think for now, people are building it's basically automations that people are building, but I think there are a few companies that are strategically positioned to take advantage of this. One example is Gumloop, and we can talk more about them for another reason. But what they do is they're kind of like Zapier, but they are like AI native. So not only can you do like the rigid workflows, but now you can do more fluid things. And in the future, once AI gets even better, they have all the knowledge of all these different workflows. And so instead of humans having to build them, the AI will just know, oh, I've done this in the past. Here's what it looked like then. Here's the new information, which makes it different now. I'm just going to intelligently decide what to do this time. And so now you're not actually building the workflow yourself. The AI is handling all of it.
Got it. I remember seeing like someone tweet out that they were hiring for a role in their company, but only AI agents were allowed to apply. Did you see that?
Yeah, this was Firecrawl.
Yeah.
What they do is they also help with AI agents. They were basically a web scraping company, but rebranded to be fancy with AI.
Yeah.
And this is a good example of where AI works pretty well. Instead of web scraping is hard because it's very brittle. You have to specify like each website, this is the information to extract. And so it might work on one website, but it won't work on another. Whereas with AI, you can give it high level, like, hey, get me the company name, get me the company description, get me the logo. And the AI will figure out, based on this new site, how should I create the code to actually scrape it? And so that's what Firecrawl does. But I did see that it was obviously a marketing stunt,
Yeah.
but at
Yeah.
the same time, I thought it was pretty interesting. I
Oh,
think there are,
yeah, go ahead.
now, I was going to say, I think there are two interesting things here that are semi related to AI agent, but not quite. One is, I think the future of doing work is a lot of people will be doing their work on a phone. So if you're ever like an executive that has a lot of direct reports, you get to this, or like once you start managing people, you get this, the first time you do it, you get this amazing feeling where you tell somebody to do something and then they handle it. And it's not you just like sitting at your laptop doing it. And executives tend to do a lot of work on their phone. Like Jack Dorsey is very famous for this. And once we get agents that are as good as humans at doing work, I feel like we'll just be delegating a lot of work via like your phone. It's like, hey, go handle this. Maybe it's a different agent, go handle that. And so I think we'll see more and more people do work from their phone. That was the first thing that I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I would agree. I would probably say I can see a lot of that happening through voice because like typing up all the complexities and like, because I think you could use your talking voice to kind of abstractly try to figure out and ramble and go in a circle. And then the AI agent like, all right. And repeat it back to you in a very simple way. Like, oh, yeah, yeah, that's what I meant. Go for it.
Mhm.
So I could see that happening a lot with voice. It's probably ties to the thing I was mentioning earlier. I think we're going to see, I mean, maybe a year ago, I was like, oh, we're going to see a lot of 10-person companies. I kind of really feel like there's going to be a trend towards 1-person companies, especially if it's like an online digital business.
Yeah. So actually, the company I mentioned earlier, they just raised like a $17 million Series A, and they only have 3 employees, including
Oh,
co-founders. So they had 2 co-founders and one full-time employee when they raised this round, which is incredible.
that is
Um,
incredible. And what I feel like now there's like a generation of companies that are popping up that is building AI native apps, but they're also building AI native internal
companies.
company like
Yeah.
operations. I was like, dude, the combination of both of those things means you can scale, you can build faster than any time in history. You can scale revenue faster than any time in history. And the combination of those two things is kind of crazy.
It's crazy. I saw this one person tweet out. I think they built kind of like what you were mentioning, mm, basically voice rambling to like text notes. They built this app and they scaled it to I think 5 million in revenue, yearly revenue, and it's just one person. And he was like, "Oh yeah, before this, I didn't even know how to code," which is also mind blowing.
I think there's a guy that worked at Uber, right? The GM, the New York GM, former New York GM.
It might have been.
Yeah, yeah,
I didn't look to
yeah.
see who it was, but that was crazy.
Yeah, I think his name is Josh. I guess he worked at Uber, ran New York. I guess when they public, he like retired. Never coded before. I think he had a little bit of coding experience, but not like building. With all the AI stuff, he thought it'd be a fun project to teach himself how to build. The voice stuff was like the hot trend at the time. And he has a lot of operations, marketing, sales background. So I'm assuming he grew it after he built
Yeah.
it. But he has like 5 mil. I think last time he tweeted was like growing really fast, and it's just him.
Yeah. I Yeah, the scale of the internet, that's one of my big realizations, I guess, over the past 2 years, is that no matter how big things get, they can always get bigger. Like Apple being a $1 trillion company, at some point, that was like holy shit, that's insane. We'll have trillion-dollar companies, but now we have like multiple trillion-dollar companies. And soon that's going to continue to grow. I think the same will be true for creators. Like the biggest creators will continue to get bigger and bigger. I remember 10 million subscribers was the top YouTuber at the time. Now I think it's probably like 200 million, 300 million is the subscriber count. And I think the scale of the internet we just haven't seen yet.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree.
I've also been seeing this thing that I think somebody described as super teams, and I've been seeing it a lot with my friends. And this is largely due to the internet. You discover people that are excellent at different things. Some people are excellent at products, some people are excellent at engineering, some people are excellent at growth. And so it'll be like a handful of people, maybe 3 or 4, 5 people that are friends. And they're like, hey, part time, we're just going to help each other build a software product. Here's what we think we should build. And then all async over text, build this company. And my friends have some that are scaling to like 100K monthly. These friends working part time, and they all just
Oh,
handle different parts of the business. And yeah, sometimes they outsource it to somebody else. So like technically they'll be like in charge of growth, but they know like agencies, they know influencers, and the influencers and the agency does the work. They just manage that process,
oh
which
my
has
god,
been
that's
yeah,
so amazing. Like, it feels like a ocean, what's that movie, Ocean's 11 or 12, where
yeah,
like
exactly.
this team comes together for a project and then they make a ton of money and then they disband.
Yeah,
See that? I actually like this
yeah,
structure a lot more because it's a lot more fluid and doesn't have that long-term commitment. And if something doesn't work, you just move on. But coming together to work on something where everyone contributes whatever their strengths are, I mean, it's pretty cool. I don't know what I
yeah.
would contribute if you ask me. I'll be your coach. Call me if you need anything. Let me
Actually,
know where
don't
I can
call
be
me, text
helpful.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, text me. Yeah, voice. Send me a voice note and I'll respond with a voice note. But no meetings.
Yeah, I'll transcribe it, ask
Yeah,
ChatGPT and send that back to you.
yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. I saw that you wrote something about service businesses are sexy again. What does that mean?
Yeah. So I think traditionally in the venture landscape, service businesses were looked down on for a long time. It was like
Yeah,
heavy
yeah.
on people. Everyone was like, no, you should do software based businesses because you can get
Got it.
higher margin, they can scale easier. But Palantir has had a breakout year, or perhaps a couple of years over the past 3 years. And because Palantir has become sexy, their model, which is heavily service based, has also become sexy. It's like, oh, actually, we're going to do a bunch of sales, we're going to do a lot of service. And then on the back end, we're going to figure out what product features overlap with lots of different companies. But there is a huge service arm, revenue arm there. And because Palantir has become sexy and has like this ridiculous market cap, a lot of people are like, holy shit, service businesses can become large. And then the second thing that compounds this is agents. Before, if you had a service company, for example, an ads agency, you'd have to, in order to get more clients or service more clients, you would have to hire more people. But as AI gets better and better, you're able to automate not just the back end anymore, but core functions that your agency does, such as like the copywriting or creating the creative or creative strategy. And so now you can service more clients while hiring less people. So now your service agency has almost
Uh,
software margins, which is very interesting. So those are like the two reasons the services have become sexy again.
I mean, their business is just so great because I'm assuming their contract value is probably billions of dollars because they're working with government. But
Yeah.
also, really, like on a smaller scale, I guess you could do that for pretty much anything that's service based, like an agency.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm seeing it a lot with agency owners because agency owners are like on top of their margins and they're like, how can I automate? How can I make this like a more efficient business? So a lot of these agency owners are tech forward.
It reminds me of like I saw this tweet by the Salesforce CEO. I don't even know if this is true, but it says like they get 36,000 customer support inquiries every week, and now 31,000 or 86% are now resolved by an AI agent. And a month ago, only about 26,000 could be resolved by the AI agent. So that's crazy. That
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the support ticket, everyone's probably asking the same stuff over and over again. And after they solve it once, they could just update like whatever their AI agent to solve it in the same manner. But
Yeah.
that's
I
crazy.
think, yeah, it's crazy. I think there's like, I can explain why this is kind of happening, or like what I've seen that makes it so. So first we had the chat interface. So first
Yeah.
thing was like, we're just answering customer queries. They have a question. They don't know where the information is or what the company can do. We're just basically reading the documentation for you and giving you an answer. That's a lot of what customer support people used to do. The second thing that they do a lot of is they have these recurring inquiries that aren't just information. It's like, change my password, change my billing information, update my order, send it to a different address. There are a lot of these types of questions that are very easy to solve, but are like very specific to the individual and the situation. And now AI agents are very good at this too. They can now take action to solve these recurring requests. So I think that what has shown the big jump between the previous month. Before it was just answering questions. Now it can actually do stuff. And in the future, maybe it'll be able to like fix bugs too on the code base, which would be pretty interesting.
Oh man, whenever I start a company, I could just like plug and play a lot of AI agents to do a lot of this work. That'd be amazing.
That would
Um,
be incredible. The last thing I'll say is I recently discovered, and I can't talk about what the company does or the company name, but I recently found out about a company that had 6 employees and $100 million in revenue.
oh man, I think that's just going to be more and more of a trend.
Yeah.
Like that circles back to what you were saying earlier. Like I think we'll start seeing a lot of smaller teams or maybe super teams getting there, raising no money and getting to these really great outcomes. And that becoming more and more possible when people see that, they're like, oh, I think I can do that too. I just wonder what would happen. I think VT funds will always exist for like, if you try and build like new energy sources that
Yeah.
requires a lot of money or AI infrastructure. Yeah, you have to raise a lot of money. But for a lot of the ideas that most people come up with, you don't need to raise a lot of money. So I just wonder how that industry is going to shift over the next decade.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm trying to do this year. It's figure out. So Tim Ferriss, a lot of people have read the 4 Hour Work Week. And in the past, he had this saying, the old rich versus the new rich. Old rich was like maximizing like wealth and amount of money. New rich was maximizing freedom. And we're in this interesting place where you can now have both. One is
Yeah.
with the scale of the internet, you can become extremely rich. Like these software GPT wrappers, if you want to call them that, can get massive. And also you can be like time rich too. So yeah, this year I'm trying to figure out how can I get both of these? Also, how can I work with people that I just love working with just because it's fun, and trying to figure out how to build a massive company that has massive impact while maximizing freedom. I think that's my main goal for this year.
Yeah. This circles back to your question about what about letting go of ambition. I kind of feel like what you just described is a really great way to redefine success and do it on your own terms. And I find that to be very ambitious. So I think you already kind of have it figured out if we had to circle back to that initial question.
Nice.
So
Shall we
maybe we,
leave it
yeah.
there?
Yeah, like let's just end it there. But it's always great seeing you. I always enjoy our conversation. I'll probably hit you up in 6 to 12 months to come back on and see what's going on in SF and tech. But thanks again for hopping on.
Yeah, thank you. And hopefully in 6 months' time, I'll have a concrete example of what we've done, how we've scaled it,
Yeah.
and who else is on my super team.
Or yeah, I want in 6 months you built a company by yourself that has reached like $10 million in revenue. That'd be
The
amazing.
dream.
The
That would
dream.
be the dream.
And then
Yeah.
you're like working like 10 hours a week. Cool, man. Thanks again.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.